I'm Chris Kennedy. I'm a professor of civil engineering specializing in sustainable urban infrastructure. I did my bachelor's in civil engineering at Imperial College in London, England, and then decided I didn't really want to be a civil engineer. So I then went and studied economics for a year at the University of Warwick, and then came out with a postgraduate diploma. And then I decided I did want to be an engineer. So I returned to engineering. I did a master's and a PhD at the University of Waterloo, not far from where we are now. I joined U of T, this Department of Civil Engineering, 15 years ago, I believe, so that would be in 1997. And then since becoming a professor at University of Toronto, I also picked up a part-time MBA at the Rotman School of Business just up the street. At the undergraduate level, I've taught engineering ecology, taught hydrology and hydraulics, and I'm currently teaching engineering economics. At the graduate level, I have an infrastructure economics course that I teach. I've also taught statistics in the past. And there's also a 500 level course, Design of Infrastructure for Sustainable Cities, that has both undergrads and graduate students in that course. There's elements of sustainability in just about all the courses I teach, whether it's an ecological aspect or an environmental aspect or an economic aspect. And in some cases, some of my courses are actually just about developing sustainable cities, so it's front and center to pretty much everything I do in my teaching. My research is all about sustainable cities, how cities grow, how do they reduce their environmental impacts, how they maintain themselves economically. It's a very exciting area of research. Lots of students are attracted to it. It's also, at this point in time, it's very exciting because there's sort of an emerging science of cities coming around, whereby cities are sort of seen as these growing organic things, and there's people trying to establish what the new paradigm for understanding cities is. My students get involved in all sorts of different projects to do with sustainable cities. Some are looking at the cybernodynamic basis of cities, others are looking at more applied work, looking at the greenhouse gas emissions and how they tie into regulatory policy. I've got others looking at cities in the context of a broader global picture of stresses on the environment. And other students have done work from green buildings through water systems up to sustainable transportation systems. It's a real exciting mixed bag of research. Some of the research involves work with industry, such as our work on green buildings has influenced some of the way that commercial buildings in Toronto, for example, are assessed in terms of their economic performance. But more broadly, the research has been very useful to the international community. We've helped the World Bank, United Nations Environment Programme and others develop a unique global standard for assessing greenhouse gas emissions from cities. And we're continuing to work with people at the international level, looking at how to move the sustainable cities agenda forward, how to help cities, provide tools to cities to help them economically and environmentally. The main beneficiaries of the research are actually cities themselves. Some cities learn from the research we do. I mean, there's examples whereby you look at the way the greenhouse gas emissions are reported in some cities around the world. New York, for example, they've used some of our methods and techniques and understanding and science in the way they understand their own environmental performance. About 4 or 5 years ago, I got together with some colleagues from the Industrial Ecology Society, and we realized that there was a need to better understand how greenhouse gas emissions compare between cities. Up to that point, there had been a number of different methods applied, and it was difficult to do comparisons. So we did a comparison analysis of 10 global cities, European, North American, plus Bangkok and Cape Town and others. And this paper that we produced was a landmark paper. It had a big impact on policymakers and on their establishment of a common protocol for doing greenhouse gas emissions. It also had some science in it. We now have a better understanding of the factors that underlie the greenhouse gas emissions from cities as a result of this work. So I've just returned from a one-year sabbatical working for the OECD, that's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is an international organization based out of Paris. Part of my work there was involved with looking at sustainable cities, but I also was working on trying to help them understand policies that would encourage private sector to invest, let's just say, a lot of money in sustainable, climate resilient infrastructure. That's infrastructure that both produces low carbon, low greenhouse gas emissions, but also it enables future populations to live with high resilience to the extreme weathers that climate change is bringing about anyway. And what was interesting about this work was I got to fly off to meet with insurance companies and pension companies and investors, people in the financial world, to understand what we would have to do, what policies would have to change in order to make them invest in that type of infrastructure. So last year I published a new book called The Evolution of Great World Cities, Urban Wealth and Economic Growth. And this book is a celebration of cities and those that have written about them. It goes back in time, looks at the works of some great philosophers and economists who have inquired as to how urban economies work. And in the book, which has really two parts, I use urban history as a means to test how well economic theory stands up to explain how cities function. The first half of the book is concerned with the wealthiest cities of all, the financial centers, how they grow, how they establish themselves, and how they outcompete with others. And then the second half of the book is more concerned with the growth of cities in general. And this is interesting from an engineering and infrastructure planning perspective, because it describes how the way we physically build cities, the way cities are shaped and formed, actually influences their economies. So next year we're starting a new master's program. It's an MEng in Cities Engineering and Management. What's really unique about this program is it mixes technical skills of engineering with broad management skills to deal with some of the great complex challenges of managing our cities into the future. So we're really excited about this program that's going to be starting in September. Where I'm headed to over the next 5 to 10 years is looking at the collective environmental impacts of cities at the planetary level, understanding the overall impacts. You know, about 75% of the world's population is going to be living in cities by 2050. So the cities have a huge role, both politically and economically and environmentally, in the workings of the planet.